We are ready to go. So, hello everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome. We're so happy to see you. I see a couple of familiar names and faces, but generally we are so happy to be able to host new and old friends. My name is Teng. I am a family engagement manager at the Federation for Children with Special Needs. We're going to be introducing a couple of other folks later as well. But today, welcome to our Building an ELPAC Community webinar hosted by both FCSN and Ola from DESE. We're going to be going over some tips and best practices rooted in family engagement, as well as answer any questions you may have. More to come on the agenda. If you had just come into the Zoom, this is a multilingual meeting. If you speak a different language, you may go into the Zoom functions below to find a language channel for either Spanish, Portuguese, or Mandarin Chinese. If you do not speak any of those languages and you are looking for another way to access this material, you can click into the link that we just put down for Wordly AI, which allows you to access all languages. If you speak Haitian Creole in that case, please access French as a substitute. And David has shared the slides translated in all the requested languages in the chat. So without further ado, moving over to introduce the rest of the crew. While we do so, please, we want to know who you are. So please do type in your name, your role, and your school district in the chat. For our families, your role can be family, ELPAC leader, or however you'd like to identify. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Megan.
Hi, Anne. Hi, everyone. This is Meghan Chapman. I'm a family engagement manager here at the Federation. I specialize in working with family-led groups. So CPACs, ELPACs, school site councils, etc. And I'm happy to work with your ELPAC and or with your EL coordinators as you're trying to build one. Am I doing, and reaching it, transferring over to Cambria as well? Are we popcorning? Please. Okay, thank you. Cambria, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Cambria Russell. I am the Senior Programming Director at the Federation for Children with Special Needs, and part of my role is to be the director of the Statewide Family Engagement Center. And we are really appreciative of the opportunity to share some information with you and to collaborate with Ola on this work supporting ELPACs.
Thank you, Cambria. And we also have our lovely Ola team here as well. David, would you like to introduce yourself before we keep going?
Sure. David Valade. I'm from the Office of Language Acquisition at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So glad to be part of this webinar with the fantastic team here at FCSN. This is going to be a great morning. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to Sibel Hughes, also from OLA.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming here. I'm Sibel Hughes. I'm the Assistant Director of the Office of Language Acquisition, and we are very, very happy of being here. Thank you so much.
Okay, amazing. Thank you all for coming again. I'm seeing, you may see me going like this. It's because I have two monitors, but I'm seeing a couple of folks in the chat from Atlanta Charter. There's a couple of ELPAC leaders. Shrewsbury's here, which is really cool. Marshfield is here, Lexington, Peabody, Marshfield, Amherst, and a couple others, Pembroke, which is awesome. There's too many to read out, but I just wanted to give a couple of highlights out. And before we go on really quickly, I'd also love it if folks could type into the Zoom chat, just to start us off, how many language are represented in your district? So that's how many language are represented in your district. If you do not know, it is okay to just say you don't know. If you have you think a pretty accurate guess, feel free to type that in and share it as well. But we'd like to know where folks are coming from, if there's any info that they like to share and such. So I'm saying 28, 75 plus in Lexington, about 45 in Cambridge, 8, 47, 9, over 50 languages in Westboro, about 50, 24, around 200. Wow. 16 And folks, y'all can keep going. And everybody else can read the chat, but I'm going to keep moving forward. But this is really good to know, and it's really interesting to hear from everybody. So thank you for sharing. To start us off, I'd like to go over our agenda for today. So we've already introduced each other. We've heard a little bit from you. We know generally what types of ranges of languages folks are working with in our districts, which is a lot. It's a really wide range, and that's really cool and awesome. Before we go further down to our tips and best practices, we're going to go over the value of ELPACs and what that means in a family engagement sort of sphere. We're also going to be defining what an ELPAC is through how our communities define it and also through the law. And we're going to end off with giving folks, again, some tips and best practices, as well as pointing available resources out for you, and ending with a Q&A if the time allows it. Again, if folks have any questions at all throughout this entire process, feel free to put them in the chat and we can get back to that later, or one of us will get back to you right away through text. Something will happen. Cambria, I see that you muted yourself.
I did.
Session. I'm going to move it over to you.
Excellent. So we're all here today to talk about ELPACs, and ELPACs are essentially family engagement arms, I guess, of our community. So kind of the basis of ELPACs is in family engagement. So I want to make sure everyone is aware of the family engagement framework in Massachusetts. This is a framework that was built by families, teachers, pediatricians, folks from state agencies. 500 people over 2 years worked together to decide what it is Massachusetts believes about family engagement. And so it's a wonderful resource. I am sure one of my fantastic friends will drop the link to the framework for me in the chat. It is available in multiple languages. I just want to talk to you a little bit about the basic elements of family engagement according to our state's family engagement framework. So these 4 elements build on one another. So we start with building positive relationships, and the idea in the framework is that we can't do anything until we actually have a decent relationship between the school and the families. And the ELPAC is a great way to do that, to build those positive relationships. We also want to think about relationships between families, not just between the family and the schools. The second element, which builds on that, is promoting family well-being. So we know that the success of our kids in school depends on, the well-being of the family as a whole. So that's the second element in family engagement. And again, ELPACs have a great role they can play in connecting families to different resources in that. The third, and I think probably one of the least well understood elements, is promoting pathways for partnerships with families. A lot of times we think about an engaged family as the mom who shows up with cookies for the bake sale, who is always chaperoning trips. And that's one way for families to be engaged, but we want to make sure we're promoting lots of ways that allow different sorts of families to engage with the schools. I could talk about that for a year, and I'm not going to because we don't have a lot of time, but check it out. It's my favorite part of the framework. And then fourth is ultimately what we all want to happen, which is that family engagement can support child and youth development, learning, health, and well-being. All the research tells us that authentic family engagement, partnerships between the school and families will lead to better attendance. That's a big issue we're having right now. Higher graduation rates, less discipline problems, higher teacher satisfaction, and better reputation for the school and the community. Okay, Anne, you can go to the next slide. And this fantastic slide just shows you where there's an intersection between those elements of family engagement and how ELPACs can help your district. So this list comes from some of DESE's guidance that we will refer to later. But you can see the overlap between family engagement elements and ELPACs. So ELPACs help us connect families and schools, And that helps with building positive relationships and promoting pathways for partnership. I won't go into a lot of details because we're so short on time in this 1 hour, but I would love for folks to go back to this slide and look at it more intentionally later. All right, and we need to think about what an ELPAC even is. And I love that we have this quote from Chelsea. This is how they are defining their ELPAC as an ELPAC is a group of parents, guardians, and educators that come together to help the school district to better understand the needs of their students and to help us improve educational outcomes for them, which is basically family engagement, which makes me very happy. I think that David is going to talk to us now about the more legal definitions of an ELPAC.
Thank you, Cambria. The LPAC is part of the Look Act, the act relative to language opportunity for our kids that was signed in 2017. This is after almost 15 years of no bilingual parent advisory councils recognized in schools. So this is a rebuilding of a very powerful council of parents. And so basically the top two pieces here is that parent advisory councils, they advise schools and districts on matters that do impact English learners and former English learners. And they also promote and strengthen those school and family partnerships. So critical for that. And also keeping parents informed. This is a great way for schools to let parents know what's going on. And also other pieces such as the right to choose a language program for their child. And there are so many other ways to keep in touch. And so it's really important that we do. We have slides down the line that's going to give a little more information on that. And also, we're going to have a poll, but before we get to the poll, I do want you to know that although there are some requirements for having an LPAC, any school or any district can host an LPAC. You don't have to meet the magic number or percentage. Start now.
Thank you, David. And that's so important to hear. We're going to move over to a quick poll because we also want to hear from you. So I'm going to also be putting the questions again for any poll that we do in the chat so that it is accessible in all languages. Folks also have, again, access to the translated slides. Every translated PowerPoint slide has the language for all these polls as well. And our lovely interpreters will also be reading them out. So let me start the first poll. Which of these best describes the status of your ELPACs? I'm also reading them out. I forgot to say that. So you could say that you don't have an active ELPAC. You may already be launching or have launched an ELPAC this year. Your ELPAC is led by school staff. Your ELPAC is co-led by school staff and at least one family member. Your LPAC will be led by families this year, or your LPAC has been led by families for more than 1 year. So I'm seeing a couple of folks answering in the poll, and I'm going to wait on a couple more. Couple of changing numbers. Okay, I'm going to give it 5 more seconds if anybody else wants to pitch in, but otherwise I'm going to end the poll now. So these are our results. So 6% of us don't currently have an active LPAC, but hopefully would love to know more, which is why you're here. Some 23% of us have launched or are currently launching an LPAC this year. 19% of us have LPACs led by school staff. 32% of us have ELPACs led by school staff and at least one family member. And 19% of us has an ELPAC that's been led by families for more than 1 year. And that's really interesting to know. It's really great to know, just have a general indicator of who's in the room with us. And we'll have information for folks that is in any of these categories moving forward. So thank you for sharing. Okay, I'm going to move onwards to the next slide. David, back to you.
Yes. And this is basically, this slide is what I mentioned earlier. Under the law, under the Look Act, ELPACs, districts are required to have an ELPAC if they have at least 100 English learners, or they have a student population of 5% or more students who are receiving EL services. Or if a school or district is designated as underperforming or chronically underperforming. It is also important to know that parents and families of former English learners are also are welcome and definitely expected to be part of the ELPAC. So it's not just English learners, it's also former English learners. And I think I'm going to pass this on to Megan now.
Thanks, David.
Welcome.
Yeah, we're going to talk now about what do ELPACs do, and thinking about the actual activities of an ELPAC, because a lot of us sometimes when we're working with family-led groups, we might the families may have one version of an understanding of what the role is, and the district may have another. So we're just going to talk about that for a minute. ELPACs are their role is to advise the school district, including the school committee or board of trustees if it's a charter school, on matters that impact English language learners. So that can be policies, it can be programs that you're considering ending or starting. It can even be practices. Maybe it's where you're going to be sharing information. You might want to move it to a parent hub, but it would be important to have the ELPAC parent voice to be able to say, I'm sorry, most parents don't have access to that hub, and here's why. And maybe you uncover a gap that then makes many of your services and your information more accessible to families. I use that example because it really did happen in a district. So it's a great way to bring families in whenever you have a program, a policy, or a practice that you're considering for English language learners. Okay, activities, we're going to speak a little bit more about these in depth as we move forward, but meeting regularly with relevant school decision makers. What does that mean? ELPACs are not just, whew, great, I got families to actually meet and talk to each other. We're all done. Nope. The A of ELPAC is advising. So what it means is once you have this family group and you're nurturing it and helping them grow, you're going to meet regularly with them school staff, and families, you're going to meet regularly with your school staff who are decision makers. So that could be the EL director or EL coordinator, whatever that role and title is in your district. You might also meet with the superintendent. You would report to the school committee a couple of times a year. At the beginning of the year, you might say, hi, here's what we're planning. At the end, you say, here's how that plan went. In between, it's, could you help us so that our plan actually, is successful? Okay. The ELPAC will host informational sessions for parents about language programs and resources. Clearly, that means you're collaborating families and school district, because you want to be sharing the information that is accurate with families, and you don't want the ELPAC trying to guess what the information is. You want to actually be present in those meetings to answer questions from families. You want to the ELPACs act as a bridge between the families and schools, communicating that important information and resources. I think we've all experienced that, sending an email out to all EL families aren't opened by all EL families for any number of reasons. And so we're always trying to reach families and find trusted people in the community to help build trust in your district and your staff. That's what your ELPAC can do. These are leaders in your community, and you're helping develop them as leaders in your community. And then families will ask them questions. They'll develop trust with that person, and then that trust can be transferred to the district. And that's really important for family engagement, that trust and relationship building. And then providing insight into barriers that students in EL programs and their families face and collaborating on solutions. This is the gold mine, because this is, you want your solutions and the work that you do, school districts, staff, you want your solutions to be used, right? You spent all that time developing them. If you bring families in, they'll be able to help you say, oh, wait, if you do it this way, this is going to make it so families can actually access it and use it every week instead of just one time. Oh, well, that's way more useful to you, and it's more useful to the families. It's more useful to the students. We want to be able to create solutions that are useful for everyone, and not just checking boxes, right? You don't have time for that. Families don't have time for that. We all want improvement and better outcomes for students. Okay, next slide. So who leads the ELPAC? I just mentioned a few of those people, right? You can see how we need multiple groupings of people. ELPACs are family-led groups. They create bylaws. Excuse me. A little frog there. But family-led groups that create bylaws. So the bylaws say, this is how we're going to decide how to run elections, when to run elections. Are we going to have co-presidents? Are we going to have a president and a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer? What is our organization going to look like? And we can help with that, by the way, if that's useful. The FCSN can help. But why should ELPACs be family-led? Well, number one reason I'm going to offer you is going back to that. There's many reasons, but the one that I want to highlight today is that trust and relationship building. Because if your staff is leading the ELPAC, and you come to a group of families, you're this position of power, and the folks in the room are I'm not saying everyone, but may feel intimidated to be able to give you any negative or constructive feedback. Culturally, that might not be comfortable. Culturally, that might not be something that a lot of your families can do. But if you create a family-led group where they're talking to other families, then they can be more open and share their ideas, share their requests, and you'll actually identify gaps in your system. And every system has gaps, because systems are run by humans, and we're all flawed. So there are just gaps in every system. That's great. Let's just find out what they are and make them better, right? So district leaders, we're looking at your EL directors. We're thinking about your superintendent. We're thinking about your school committees, your board of trustees. Families, we're talking about caregivers of current and former EL students. And I want to highlight those former EL students, because again, they may feel more comfortable sharing what their experience was like more honestly now that their student isn't receiving EL services, because they aren't afraid of any sort of retaliation. And representing these families all represent the cultures and communities and languages most spoken in your school district. You want that. You want that depth. You want to understand from all different perspectives how well your programs are doing in serving the needs of your EL students. Community support, we're thinking about our translators and our interpreters, but we're also thinking about local partners. That can be your staff at your libraries. It can be your Boys and Girls Club. It might be your YMCA or a group that's teaching English as a second language classes. You want to connect with them to actually outreach to families in those spaces, and also to have them become ambassadors of your ELPAC, to constantly be reminding people in the community that they have this space to come and work in and share. Okay, next slide. So we're going to give you a lot of tips and best practices. Here's where it starts. And we do want you to note which ones really stand out for you, because at the end, we are going to ask you which ones you might incorporate into your work this year. And we're very interested to see which ones are most important to you. So for this one, we're just talking about those meetings and that communication between the ELPAC and the school district. So the ELPAC meets monthly with their families. In general, this is best practices. You meet monthly with your families, and we really need school districts to help promote those events, because the ELPACs do not have access to the list of EL families. You do, school districts. So they need you to help them promote that, both in the schools, online, maybe through WhatsApp, maybe through social media. It's usually multiple. To be truly successful, it needs to go through multiple platforms. ELPAC family leaders in best practice will meet monthly, at least with their EL director. Depending on the size of your district, it might be more frequent, to be honest. Districts the size of, say, Boston can often meet, twice a month, and they meet once with the superintendent, the person relevant in the superintendent's office, monthly. But in most districts, a quarterly meeting with the superintendent would be appropriate. ELPAC family leaders would present twice a year to the school committee or their board of the board at the charter school. Again, the first meeting would be, hi, this is our plan for this year. The end of the year, this is how it went. But again, feel free to lean into, hi, we still need support to help meet our goals. This is where you go back to the school committee and ask for resources. School committee can also assign a liaison, someone from the school committee, to attend your monthly meetings so that they can report back to the school committee, especially if they have a subcommittee on EL services, to be able to say, hi, this is what's going on and what we're hearing from families. And then that gets that voice of families carried forward in other rooms. Great. Looking forward to hearing more about what you all think about this, but I'm going to pass this to, who are we passing this to, Anne?
Me.
Yay. Oh,
Hello.
it's a poll.
Yes, coming back again really hot with a poll. So I am going to be again sharing this poll very quickly. But I just also wanted to add that before I share the poll, this is a multiple choice poll. And the question is, which of these tips and best practices will you be using this year? You can again click as many as you would like. I did not share the languages in the chat like I said I would the last time. So I will do so before I share the poll this time. And I see a couple of questions in the chat. Folks, please keep them coming. We will gather this and we will either get back to you here or we'll get back to you at another time as well. But we are always here and happy to help. All right. And our lovely, lovely interpreters will also be speaking to and reading these polls questions aloud as well. But what we would really like to know again is, which of these tips and best practices will you be using this year? I'm going to give folks a couple of questions to go in and answer. And I will also be reading this aloud right now for folks. So, invite ELPAC family leaders to advise on policies, procedures, and practices that impact EL students, monthly meetings with your EL director, quarterly meetings with the superintendent, asking your school committee or board of trustees to assign an ELPAC liaison, and lastly, co-designing solutions that will improve student outcomes and meet family needs. If you don't see anything on this poll that you think is also super important and everybody should be considering, please do share your own tips in the chat. We would love to hear them. So I'm seeing a couple of folks answer this already. I'll give it a couple more seconds. I know people are still reading this through. But right now we're seeing a pretty wide range, which is really awesome. Okay. I'll be closing this in 5 seconds. Okay. And here are our results. So 65% of us will be inviting ELPAC family leaders to advise on policies, procedures, and practices that impact all students. I forgot to say that 73% of us will be co-designing solutions that will improve student outcomes and meet family needs, which makes all of us at FCSN extremely happy to hear. 35% of us are looking forward to monthly meetings with their EL director, 12% of us quarterly meetings with the superintendent, and 23% of us to ask their school committee and board of trustees to assign an ELPAC liaison. This is awesome. I'm going to stop sharing here. And of course, as always, feel free to share your own tips in the chats as we keep rolling along. We'd love to hear everything you would like to say to us. And we're always happy to hear from you. Moving onwards to our next slide. I'm going to go over a little bit more on tips and best practices for meetings. So our school district ELPAC coordinator would do the following in the bullet points that you see on the screen: provide a document and slide translation, such as how we are doing this meeting, so that everybody can access their language no matter what they speak. They would also be promoting events multiple times on multiple channels to families and staff. Depending, especially, and this is especially important because depending on where our multilingual communities are, they may be speaking different languages, they may be participating in different community circles, their social media, preferred social media might look different. But generally, this also includes school and districts newsletters, social media, putting some flyers in backpacks so that a paper trail is also accessible, different forms of texts. I know a lot of folks out here use WhatsApp. That's also a really great way to get the word out. And the list goes on and on. But also, and super importantly, a really great best practice is also provide in-meeting interpretation. And a great way to make sure that that happens and that it's, it meets the needs of your community accordingly is to send out a notice ahead of time to ask for what languages they would like to see interpreted in your presentation or in your meeting. That's a really great way to make sure that every voice is heard, every voice is considered, and also included. I'm going to move on over to our next slide and pass it over to myself and Cambria, I think. Cambria, I'm going to start us off, and then if you have anything else to add, I'd love to hear it. But something else that we really want to highlight too is what do our district decision makers do? And what does that look like for everybody? So our district decision makers, which includes a lot of superintendents here, our educators, our staff, they invite ELPACs to advise on policies, procedures, and practices that can impact L students and their families. And that also goes both ways. But also, most importantly, they don't just listen, they're here to act. And something that really goes along the line of that is that when we are in spaces like this, where there's an advisory panel, where families and school districts work together, is that we are sharing the power dynamic of the table, and we're making sure that all voices are heard equitably and that all of our decisions are made with inclusion in mind. And this brings us to one of our favorite segments of our presentation, our content, co-design. So co-designing solutions with families is also something that our district decision makers will be doing. It improves student outcomes and family needs, and we're going to be going right into that section right now with Megan.
One of my favorite topics. All right, but you're getting the highly abbreviated version. If anyone has any questions about co-design, about like, how do you really do this? Email me, please. I'm all for it. So I'm going to read this, and I'd like you to type into the chat any of the phrases that really resonate with you here. What is co-design? Co-design is when we connect people from all groups or representative from different groups of any people who will be impacted by the work, and to share in the design and decision-making of the solution itself from the beginning all the way to the end, right through evaluation. So families, students, school staff, and community members are treated as equal collaborators with equal power. I'm going to give you a moment to just type into the chat. What phrases jump out for you? Power. Equal power specifically. Equal collaborators with equal power. Yeah, it resonates with a few people. Equal collaborators with equal power. And this is great in sharing in this equal share solution. Yes, this is what co-design is, really. You're totally getting that. This is a concept, this is a mindset of recognizing that if you, what this slide is really illustrating is if you start at the bottom circle, we think about there's ways that we ask families to, these are different ways that we've been asking families to participate in our decision-making. Sometimes we send out a survey, it's anonymous, you don't know who gave the input, and you can't go back to them to ask for clarification, right? So it's pretty far away from decision-making power. There's focus groups, then you have actual people, and you might even have anecdotes Sally said or Jose said, but you can't go back and ask them any questions about like, great, you said you wanted after-school programming in Spanish, but did that mean sports activities, or did you want homework activities? Did you want both? Where did you want it in town? Did you want it at every school, or did we want it at the Boys and Girls Club? Advisory councils, like ELPACs, this is much more interactive because we have people that you can bring into a discussion when schools, district staff are making a decision. but then you still send them away and you make the decision without them. Co-design is you say, hi, we have this group of people that we're pulling together to create this program. We have 4 different staff members already on this, that we're meeting with every Tuesday for the next month so that we can build this plan, include families. Co-design means families are there from the beginning and they're in all of those meetings so that they are decision makers and collaborators with you. And their voice is part of everything that you're doing right through to the end, right through to it's launched. Because when families are involved in it, other families are more likely to accept and use your solution. What is the point of spending 6 months developing something if in the end it didn't really meet the needs of families? Great, it checked the box, but having family voice, or even because they represent student voice, is going to mean that the solution is more powerful. And this has been proven across so many fields, including conflict resolution. I can give you conversation, but anyway, in schools, we've seen it too. When you have the families be part of the solution making, it's the kind of solution, like even if you're like, no one comes to open houses, bring in some families to design your next open house. You will find that more families will come because you're going to be doing in that open house things that families want to do. You'll be addressing needs that they have. So one more slide for me is the next one. And thank you all for the contributions in the chat. Really, I appreciate that so much. Those who are closest to the problem are the ones who are closest to the solution. And just to make this personal for everybody, I think if you've been online and on hold with any service, you're going to pay a bill, you're got to call your bank, whatever, you've screamed representative for the 3rd time into the void. You're sitting there going, why don't they just X? You have a solution floating through your head. This happens to you all day long, all week long. And I promise you, your families are walking around with, why don't they just blank? And there are some really easy solutions to apply that would make their lives better, your communication more effective, and outcomes for students improve. Okay. I'm set, Anne.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
So this is our very last poll that we're going to be asking you. We really appreciate how interactive everybody's been. It's been awesome to hear from folks. And while I chat with you, I'm going to be putting the questions again in the chat in every language that we have available so that folks can access it easier. But as always, you can also access them through the translated slides that you have on hand. Everything is in the decks. All right, so those are all of our languages. And now I'm going to open up our poll. So we're going to be going very quickly into our next section and final section on our resources that we'd like to share with folks. But before we do so, we would love to know which of these DESE ELPAC resources have you used this year? And while folks answer, I will be reading it off the slide as well. So you could be, and this is multiple choice, you can type in more than one, but you may have used the guidance on ELPACs. You may have used the ELPAC leadership convening materials. So any slides in there, any transcripts, any resources, any links from that convening. Or you may also have been using the online ELPAC training modules for either educators or for our parents that represent our families. They are available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So I see a couple of folks have answered already. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds because I know people are still reading this and putting this in their brains and all that. And I'm seeing that some folks haven't used some of the materials yet. And if you haven't, and if you would like to share that, please do also put that in the chat. You know, any data is good data. So thank you for letting us know. Okay. So I'm going to close our poll, and keep in mind too that some folks may not have answered because they may not have used the material. But these are the folks that have answered and used the materials, and we'll be seeing what folks have been using. So 88% of us have been using DESE's guidance on ELPACs. 35% of us have been using the leadership convening materials, and 35 of us have been using the online ELPAC training modules for educators, as well as 31% of us using the modules for our parents. So I'm going to let that sink in. If folks would like to just kind of think about that a little bit. if you like data, do a couple of screenshots here and there. But aside from that, I will now stop sharing this poll. Thank you all for participating, and feel free if you have any comments from that poll or just the results of it, put something in the chat. We're here to answer your questions. I'm going to move us over to our resources. So on the slide, you'll see a very brief overview of some DESE ELPAC resources that you are able to utilize. And some of those we've already mentioned in our poll earlier. We're going to be walking very quickly through the guidance for ELPACs, ELPAC information for parents, and both of these are available in 33 languages. We also have our leadership convening materials. I think I saw a question in the chat about that. We'll be putting the links in as well later for y'all to access, as well as the online ELPAC training modules for our educators and our parents available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. You will see at the very bottom of the slide a link to ELPACs, information on ELPACs. We'll be putting that in the comments as well, the chat as well. But I'm going to pass this over to the next person. I think it's Cambria before I send that in.
Thank you, Anne. So we just want to make sure you're aware of a few of the resources that are available to you. I saw a few comments in the chat that folks haven't used some of these, so maybe you don't know about them. We have this one pager with ELPAC information for parents. So this is available in 33 languages. It's a good way to maybe get people introduced to the idea. It goes over the basics, like what is an ELPAC, how people can get involved, what the duties are, and those sort of things. So that is a really useful way of introducing the idea to our families, and that is available to you in quite a few languages. And the next resource, Anne, if you could forward the slide. Thank you. This is guidance for English learner parent advisory councils for ELPACs. And it's a 17-page document, but we want to point out that there's only 7 pages of content, so it's not as dense as it might seem or intimidating as it might seem at first. And it is also available in those same 33 languages. And this is about how we can develop and support effective ELPACs. And I think it's important that it's available in multiple languages because we want to develop our ELPACs together with the families and the district together. And so this goes more in detail about the leadership duties, how you can establish bylaws. I would also encourage folks to connect with the CPAC, because your CPAC is probably already established bylaws. They might have some help that other families could provide to the ELPAC. There's information about building collaborative partnerships, and then there are a bunch of resources in the appendices. All right, and then finally we have, I think finally, maybe not finally. Next we have, I'll say that, our leadership convening materials. And so these materials come from 2021 when OLA held an ELPAC leadership convening. And that has information about the presentations that were there and lots of resources in case you weren't able to attend, or if you were there, maybe you want to revisit those just to know that they're available still. You go to the next one, Anne. Thank you. All right, these are training modules that are intended for our educators. I have to say the modules for educators and the modules for parents are really high quality, fantastic resources. We want to make sure that you all are aware of them and that you're using them. So the educator modules have a little bit more than an hour worth of narrated material, and then some resources like an FAQ and questions you might use in a focus group and a parent leadership toolkit. And then, because we're all about making sure that both educators and families know how to work together, we have the training modules for parents. And these are available in 3 languages, and they have modules that are narrated with videos, the examples of successful ELPAC and school collaborations are phenomenal. And I would say if you don't look at anything else, that might be my choice for what to really hone in on. And it also has best practices and some leadership skills for parents. All right, we have bombarded you with a lot of information, but what I want people to take away from this is that FCSN is here for you. OLA is here for you. There are a lot of existing resources, and if we can point you to them if you can't figure out where you're supposed to go. And we just want you all to know that you're not in it alone, trying to set up your LPAC, maintain your LPAC, and so forth. We have a couple of options for questions that I'd love to hear from folks in the chat. But what I would like to know, let's hone in on the blue one, which is what other resources do you think would be most useful to either families or educators in terms of supporting LPAC development and support? So, and then we'll talk to DESE and see if we can figure out how to get you those resources. So I think we know a couple of people on the call that might could help make that happen. So in the chat, please let us know what other resources would be most useful to you, to your LPAC, in terms of developing and supporting your work. So let us know if you need more basic information, if you need more expanded information. Oh, okay, great. We got them coming in now. I see resources for families. If you don't mind, could you be a little more specific about that? Resources for developing family leadership, for recruiting families, for helping them understand the PAC concept. If you could give us a little more detail on that. Maintaining LPAC membership. That's a hard one. We're all really busy, right? Models of successful LPACs. Activities for family engagement, connecting with other LPAC leaders. That's something that we Leslie, who's on this call, does a great job with CPAC. She helps connect them to one another so they can learn from each other. Technology for using meetings. So I hope people have tried Wordly today. And then we'd be happy to talk to you about that, how to run it and cost and things like that. Activities for launching. Okay, these are great. Keep them coming because this is really going to help guide work that that FCSN wants to do as we move forward and that we want to collaborate with DESE and with all of you on. We only have 2 minutes left, and I know Anne has another slide, so I'm going to let you have it back, Anne.
Thank you. And folks, like Cambria said, please keep it coming. I'm saving all of your comments. So we have this information and we will be reading it over and utilizing it. And if there's anything else that you'd like for us to, follow back with you on, we haven't gotten back to you yet. Please do put that in the chat, along with your name. We can come back to you. So one last piece of information that I would love to leave us off with for our presentation today is this resource that we hope everybody can find very helpful and utilize. So this is our new multilingual family resource, and it stems from the need that OLA has been noticing from our families and from our schools about some confusion potentially regarding the English learner education letter that goes out to families from schools whenever a family enrolls in the school and registers and notes that their family speaks more than one language in their house. So as folks know, this letter goes out to her families, but typically there was no other sort of, sustainable resource or additional context to help folks understand what the letter entails, the context of it, and what it means for folks moving forward. But we have collaborated together and co-designed with families, multilingual staff, cultural brokers, accessibility folks to come together and create these set of resources that you can access through the QR code or the link on the slide, which leads you to the website that FCSN has to display all this information. But additionally, DESE also has this information on their own website as well. And I'm sure that our lovely crew will also be putting both of these things into the chat for y'all. Both of these have really great PDFs that are available in the top 5 languages aside from English in Massachusetts. So English, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Haitian Creole. And for folks that are not particularly visual learners, or if they would like to access something in a different way, there are also videos with transcripts and closed captions that allow you to access this information and walk you through how to read it, how to access it, any tips that we have for you as well. They're available again in both of the links through FCSN and also DESE. And once you access it, you will be led to YouTube playlists that have all of this information for you. But we have a flowchart that walks you through the English learner education, or ELE, timeline and general flow. There are also 3 family-friendly tip sheets. You may have heard of this information already if you've been to other OLA convenience from the fall. One is about the what's next once you receive the letter about ELE. The second one is about program placements in schools and what that may look like for your district. And the last one is some next steps that you can take, including, what your rights are, what you need to know for yourself and such. And lastly, we have a glossary of terms available in all of our languages. Again, this is all accessible as PDF documents. And school districts can actually customize these PDF documents to add in their contact information before they send it out to their families. And if you're a family member and you're seeing these resources, that's really awesome. We're happy that you're here. These are also accessible for our families as well. And on the MassTech page, you will see that we have a page for families and also for educators to help guide you along throughout the multiple contexts that you're seeing this information through. So thank you all. I am seeing a bunch of discourse in the chat. Keep them coming. We love to hear it. But I see that we are ending just about on time today. We want to say again a huge, massive thank you for everybody that came out on this fine Wednesday morning. Thank you so much for DESE, the OLA team, for being here and doing this with us. This is really excellent information to get out, and we appreciate all the wonderful resources that are in DESE that are available to everybody here. Thank you to all of our families that are here, and most importantly, thank you to our interpreters for going through this hour with us, for walking us through, and for making this information accessible for folks that are here, and for, really modeling for all of us here, really modeling what co-designing means, what power sharing is, and also, what ELPACs can look like for all of our communities in the future. Again, you have our contact information. We are always, always here for you. If you would like to email us, if you'd like to raise your hand or leave a couple of comments in the chat, we can be here. We're just going to stop recording at this point. But again, you are always welcome, and we're so happy that you're here. And all of these resources are available to you. You're not alone in this work, and congratulations on learning a whole segment about ELPACs. This is great.